Wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. Let's start it out. Having a great day. I know you guys are too. Today we're looking at, as you can see highlighted here, the greatest performing stock that I own. Look, it's just worth mentioning. You've seen it in the portfolio recap before. The greatest performing stock that I have is none other than Apple. What a shocker, right? It's one that consistently beats the market. I've had it in the portfolio for a while. And since I've held it, it has bolstered a 165% return, the largest gain in terms of dollar amount that I have in the account. Oh my gosh. Cost basis on this one, $70.27 a share. Kind of crazy when the price is at $186 right now. I've got 50 shares of Apple. Here's what I think about Apple and how things are going to be looking for the future. Okay, that's what we're getting into today. First, we look at the stock itself. It's worth taking a peek, and you can see the price action itself. I just got to tell you, I'm still definitely a big fan of Apple, despite last year up 28% alone. 29%, it's shifting, who knew? The last 5 years, the stock is up 290%. Good golly. Now, again, for those of you who have been with me for a while here, you know I've had this portfolio now over 5 years, nearly 6 years. Had I simply, when I started the portfolio, put everything I owned into Apple, good golly. If I just said, by golly, who cares about diversification? If I did, let me tell you, I'd be a much richer man. Now, that isn't saying that's what you should do for the future, but let me tell you, you can afford to take a little bit extra risk. You know, I'm a man who doesn't take too much risk, and I got a lot of diversity. Sometimes you can afford to take a little bit of risk, and if you do, you might get something like Apple here, where you really excel quite a bit, right? So that's one thing, you know, you look back and you regret a little bit. But hey, I can't be upset with 169% gain. You know, I can't be upset with $5,880 of gain on this one. I can't be upset with that. Look, the stock's been a absolute beast over the last 5 years. How about beyond that? Look, it's been a much bigger beast than just that, right? You even look since really 2013, the stock's up 1,000%. Imagine if you bought it there. In a 10-year span, the stock's up 1,000%. 10 times gains in the span of a year. I find that pretty crazy. 10xing your money in 10 years would be a wild thing. Now, is that something we're necessarily headed to in the future? No. Past performance is not necessarily. It's not indicative of future performance. It's just not. So, again, got to mention that. But look, let's just say this thing has been a beast. That's the whole point of what we're looking at the stock for. Here's some data points that I think are worth noting, right? This is a company just recently, yet again, surpassed the $3 trillion market cap line. It's a little bit below it now, as you see with the current pricing. It's a little bit below that, which is crazy. This is the most valuable company in the world. That's kind of wild to look at. The most valuable company trading here is Apple, and they're going to, it seems like they're continuing to hold on to that title, right? We've had some competitors try to push through. You've got Microsoft, relatively similar, a little bit. Actually, it's about $500 billion short in valuation right now. Kind of crazy to think about, but Apple holds the crown right now. Now, why is it? Well, there's a lot of things about Apple that do it. First, when I look at the company, I look at the revenue line. That's one thing it's important to look at. And macro trends, they've got a great chart here. Get out of here, ads by Google. You can just shove it. That's right, I told it to shove it. I did. First, we look at the top chart here, which is a trailing 12-month, which is fantastic. Again, you see consistent growth here. Now, obviously, you saw a lot more growth back in 2011, because we saw a big dip off in revenue there. Since then, the revenue is incredible. You're talking about it on a trailing 12-month basis here. Just take a look here. $385 billion in the last freaking, what? $385 billion? That's a crazy amount of money. That's a crazy amount of money. It is. It really is. When you look on a quarterly basis, you see Q4 is obviously the big one here. You know, every time we get into the December quarter, not a shocker. I mean, it's a company that primarily for a long time has really been focused on, on selling products, right? You're talking about selling hardware, and when's a great time for selling hardware? It's for Christmas presents, dummy. So that's where you get a lot of these massive Q4s. Now, one thing worth noting, you see a little bit of a dip off here, right? A red quarter, 5% year over year, a little bit of a decline there in terms of quarterly growth. Kind of crazy to see. Now, why was that? Well, spending was outrageous in 2021. Let me just tell you that. We had people that had a bunch of stimulus checks. They were giving money out like candy. The government gave out money like candy. And people were continuing very heavy spending on everything. Now we get into 2022, which was last year, and you see this decline. And there was a lot of things going wrong in that year, right? We saw chip decline pretty massive, and overall just chips being produced and delivered, which is the vast majority of what Apple's doing. When you look at product sales, they need chips to be able to manufacture products, and they need the supply chain to be going effectively. And it just wasn't. Let's just be real. It's just been struggling, and it still kind of is. So that's why you see a little bit of headwinds in that aspect. But obviously, that turns into tailwinds later on when everything's get a little bit more stabilized, and we look from there. Now, again, what's the main thing I love about Apple right now? Okay, you just need to go to the website to find out why Apple is doing what they're doing and how their performance is. No, it's not the MacBook Air. In fact, it's actually the opposite of that. MacBook sales, not great. iPad, not doing great either. And you want to know why? Because they're really transforming the business, right? There comes a time when you saturate in terms of certain ancillary products other than the core iPhone, right? The core iPhone, not going anywhere. That's something that just stays, right? That's one thing I love a lot about Apple. And that's going to be, as you can see here, the ecosystem. So that's what I call it, the ecosystem, meaning when you are in the Apple ecosystem, you are loyal to Apple products and you get Apple everything, right? Once you get your iPhone, let's just be real. People are loyal to the phones they get. When they get an iPhone, they usually stick with the iPhone. Just a fact. It really is. So that obviously means that is generational revenue for Apple. It is, right? That as people grow up, they're still going to be getting the next, if not every year, every 2 years, getting the next iPhone. They're going to be doing that, right? That's something that they can rely on consistently for people. Once you're in the ecosystem, it's hard to get out because everything is related to it. That's what Apple does really well, right? They've got a lot of things that are exclusive to Apple that you need in order to be really to use the products as best you can. So that's why you need to stay in the ecosystem. Now, might that mean getting a MacBook on occasion? Yeah. Might that mean getting an iPad? It definitely could. Now, that's obviously not great. I don't like that animation, but hey, here's where we get into the exciting part. iPhone 14, right? Get in the iPhone. That's where people, I don't know why there's 50 cameras. No one will ever explain why all these new phones have 9,000 cameras on the back. I don't get it, right? Just buy an actual camera, people. But this is what keeps people in the Apple ecosystem, right? It really is from a product's perspective. Yeah, they've got colors, I get it. But then we go even further down. We get into the other parts of the ecosystem, the Apple Watch. It's massive. I mean, everyone's got a freaking Apple Watch at this point. I swear. I swear, they all do. Now, it's a wearable. It's great. It tracks your sleep, right? You can play music on it, take phone calls, tracks your heart rate, tracks your health, tracks everything you might need. So it's a really big tool that a lot of people utilize. And once you have an Apple Watch, you stick with having an Apple Watch. You replace it whenever you need to. You get the next generation if you have to. It's one of those things, yet again, when you're in the ecosystem, it's hard to go away, and it's really top-notch in terms of what it does in comparison to the competitors. It really is. And again, if you've got an Apple iPhone, I don't know why I said like an old person, but if you've got an iPhone, you're not going to get a Fitbit. Right? You're not going to get a Fitbit. You're going to get the Apple Watch, which pairs directly with your iPhone, right? It basically eliminates the competition in that aspect. And honestly, you can get the Apple Watch standalone. You definitely could. But my main point is that you're staying in the ecosystem if you got the iPhone. That's my main thing here. And then we've got another big competitor coming up here, going to be the Vision Pro. Now, let me tell you, there's nothing more awkward. I mean, this is the creepiest picture that you could have taken. I hate everything about this. Close your mouth or something. Something about this. Something about what's going on here and the eyeballs, it's just not comfortable. I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but I don't like looking at that image. Now, what's really cool about this? Well, as you see, the next era of spatial computing. What does this mean? Well, basically this is an AR headset, right? Augmented reality, not necessarily like your typical virtual realities where you're playing video games. And now this basically is just something you put over and it'll display similar to like the Google Glasses to an extent, but a lot more powerful in what it's able to do. So as you can see from the video, you put on the headset, you can still see your entire surrounding environment, but you can also stream through applications while you're there, right? And I think they may show a little bit more of a demo here as well. There you go. You can stream through articles, read that way. Now, why would you do it? I mean, again, look, I don't necessarily know why people would partake in this fully, but it's futuristic. It's pretty cool in that aspect. I don't find myself to use it that much. I wouldn't find myself using it too much, I should say. Now, one main thing you need to mention is the price point, right? This is a $2,500 headset, or $3,500. Oh, I should have looked that up. My apologies. Regardless, it's a very expensive headset, and it's going to be pretty exclusive on who's going to be able to use it first off. Now, again, that's pretty cool, right? You can look at content here in real time, and it's pretty cool, right? It basically, it loses your need for having a TV in that sense, right? You don't even need that. Oh gosh, that white background change kind of like just explodes your eyeballs, doesn't it? They definitely missed that one. Anyways, it's pretty cool in this aspect from a working perspective. It's really neat. There's no denying it. From a geek factor, it's really cool. Now, again, I don't think it's necessarily a major factor right now and in the near future. And you want to know why? It's because of the price point. Get that picture out of my face here. I just don't know why it's so awkward. Something about the lighting, it's just not there. So that really encompasses the hardware piece of it, right? Which is definitely a thing I like a lot about Apple because of the Apple ecosystem. Now, one extra thing on top of the Apple ecosystem, we're going to cover it right now. It's going to be the services. This is massive, right? So first off, we've got Apple Fitness Plus. So this is going to allow people, it's a service that they offer in which you can watch different like exercise videos, stuff of that nature. Once again, it's subscription based, right? Now that's something that a lot of companies are going towards, is subscription based. And you want to know why? It's because the consistency in terms of revenue. Every single month, you're guaranteed the same amount of money from that same customer, right? That's what's really nice about subscription based revenue, is you're locking people in. Usually you lock them in for at least a year. And you're going to have consistent revenue because of that, right? It's pretty nice in that aspect. And ideally, you make a good product and people stick with it and you continue to have that consistent revenue. We look to the right. This is a company that's so widespread, it's in everything you might imagine. The Apple Card. They've got, yes, that's right, they're in the finance realm too. They've got the Apple Card, which you can utilize in your Apple Wallet. Makes it super easy from that perspective. So really cool on that aspect. So they've got a financial piece to them. They've got obviously the services perspective from a fitness, and then you've got Apple TV, right? Take a look at Apple TV. Now, you take a look here, and right now, one thing I think is worth mentioning, with the streaming game, it's something where you're really in need of exclusives. Now, that's where Apple TV kind of struggles, right? You've got as featured there, Ted Lasso, definitely their biggest name by far. But on top of that, they just don't have I saw Billie Eilish in there. On top of that, they just don't have a ton of exclusives that they've got at this current moment. That's what's tough for a lot of these streaming platforms, because there's such a massive amount out there. That's kind of a negative I see for Apple. Look, I can't lie to you. It's hard to grow the subscriber base in terms of this streaming platform because there's nothing that's tying it directly to Apple that, you get a benefit from having Apple products or something like that, right? There's really nothing where you get like a discounted rate if you own an iPhone. Now, I think if they did something like that, it would make a lot more sense. You have an iPhone, you get a discounted rate. Instead, they offer promotions where people don't even need to pay at all, right? Some people don't need to pay. I know it's estimated that there's somewhere around, somewhere around 80 or 70 million subscribers. Now, again, what they've said was uh, most likely 50 million of those subscribers are not even paid, right? They're not even paid at all. This is people that got promotions and they're able to do it in that aspect and don't need to pay for it, which is kind of crazy if you know really think about it. Only about 25 million paid subscribers isn't massive for them when it's a pretty cheap subscription. Now, again, like I said, they need to find ways to make this more enticing. Either more content, which is definitely important. Now, that does increase spending, right? That does increase spending quite a bit. Or, on top of that, if you don't have more content, you want to make it cheaper for people who are already in your Apple ecosystem, so that way you're guaranteeing that they're going to stay subscribed. That's just my opinion on the matter. Don't give it to them for free necessarily, just do it at a discounted rate. So again, we look at that and that's pretty exciting, right? It's a pretty cool thing. That's kind of the end of their webpage, but you look along the top, you've got obviously AirPods, which is pretty massive too. People who have AirPods, they don't go away from AirPods. Again, that's the products they're selling, and that's why I like them a lot. Now, the big thing I love about them is we look at the breakdown of their segments. Yet again, Statista doing great things. It's going to be from a services standpoint. You see the blue line being services, something that they've been consistently growing, and you can see the consistent growth where some of these other segments have been relatively flat. I mean, you look overall from like a a Mac perspective, an iPad perspective, relatively flat. Wearables not necessarily growing massively over the last year, right? There's not too much growth there, but subscriptions continue to grow on a year-over-year basis on every aspect. Every single quarter they're growing year-over-year. That's what's pretty massive about subscriptions for them, and they're real pivot to that. So they're not solely just a company that's selling hardware. They want to include obviously the services too, and that's why, because it's growing the business massively. Now, finally, I want to look at the stats, and one thing I like a lot right now, which kind of touches into the Apple TV Plus, is the net income. Consistent growth of net income. Now, again, year over year, a slight decline, and a lot of that was there's a lot of macroeconomic factors that led to this, but it's still consistently growing when you look on a year over year basis. One little hitch along the road, and it's because of definitely big macroeconomic events happening. I like the consistent growth in net income and a very high net income line too on an annual basis. $25 million a quarter that they're or 25 billion a quarter that they're just growing in terms of net income. That's net income for the shareholders. That's really massive, right? You love to see it, right? And that happens by not increasing expenses by too much. You don't want to increase expenses by too much. Now, where you get into an issue with the Apple TV Plus, right? Increasing content means increasing expenses. So it's a fine line, and I think they need to find a way to balance that. But overall, look, that's why I'm pretty bullish on Apple here. I still continue to be, despite the levels that they're at right now, because the growth story is there, and people are trapped in the ecosystem. And I'm saying trapped because that's really true. It's hard to get out. That's why I'm a big fan of Apple at these levels. Listen, folks, that's what I got for you here today. I hope you had a great time. Let me know your opinion of Apple in the comments. Have a great one.